Thank you very much, Alexandra, and thank you all for joining us in this session, Creating the Conditions for Indigenous/Rural Communities in Higher Education Institutions. I'd like to send out a thanks as well to Ashoka Yu for making this exchange happen, especially given the extraordinary circumstances and times we're living in. So as we're coming to the end of day 2, I don't think it can be said enough that it was a bit of a risk to continue with the exchange this year, and I for one am very glad that you all took a chance on it. I'm here in the role of moderator rather than presenter, and would like to welcome you again to the session, especially as some of you are just joining us. Also, I am, in lieu of doing introductions and presenting the bios of our speakers, they will be doing that as their turns come to speak. And also, I will give a bit of an acknowledgement, which again will blend across each speaker. Noting, of course, as may have been said, you may have heard at other points in the past couple of days that we're coming together in a virtual space as opposed to being together in a particular land or a particular territory. Again, something that makes this exchange experience very unique. I thought I would give a land acknowledgement from the perspective of where I'm coming to you from, and I'll just share one slide with you. This is a picture, thanks to courtesy of NASA. I hope you can see it. There we go. This island is the most eastern part of Canada, and the very name of this island where I was born and raised bears the mark of colonialism. It's called Newfoundland, or Terre-Neuve in French, Terra Nova, Terra Nueva. So these are the unceded territories of the Halapu Mi'kmaq, the Mapukek Mi'kmaq. The northern part of the province is called Labrador, which are territories, unceded territories of the Inuit and Innu. Now, as we're all coming from education institutions and are educators ourselves, learning is teaching is what we do. What we had been taught where I'm from is that the last of the Beothuk died out and was the last of their peoples many, many years ago. And as an adult discovered that there are many Indigenous still in my province. It's a place where we still celebrate Discovery Day. Again, the discovery of a place where there had been people living for tens of thousands of years. So I think this session today is somewhat about learning, but also unlearning, things that have been made to disappear. What is the role of education in their reappearance and perhaps resurgence? So with that, I'm going to pass the torch now to James, who will begin his presentation. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Nicole. I'll just pull up some slides here. And these are mostly slides of the territory that I live in as a settler Canadian. It would have been marvelous to be in Minneapolis on the lands of the Mdewakanton Sioux communities. And Canada and the US may now be different countries, and Mexico, but we all share Turtle Island together. And I guess as we search frantically for social innovation in the new and the novel, it is important to remember that much of what we need to know and discover about resilience, healing, forgiveness, right relations with ourselves, with the land, has in a way always been right beside us. But we've willed it out of sight and out of mind. And so in the kind of, in the path of exploitation and dispossession of peoples, nations, and civilizations, you know, north of the 49th parallel, whether we did it in the right of Her Majesty or right of liberty, what is it, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, south of the 49th parallel. You know, as we were building cities, societies, and prosperity, I think, you know, having a great cataclysm like the pandemic helps us focus the mind a bit and reimagine and look beneath the surface of things. So I think it's a well-timed session. That said, I am a settler Canadian, and with really no agency to talk at depth about Indigenous issues or Indigenous perspectives. And, you know, in some ways I'm informed, but certainly not lived in terms of experience. And so I want to be very cautious and very, try and limit my comments mostly to kind of facts or perspectives on Canadian history generally, and how it affects our work. And also what the challenge in front of post-secondary is, and how post-secondaries appear to be responding. What I'm less able to respond on is how effective is it, and how well does it actually reflect Indigenous values and respond to those. The next few slides really just kind of outline the territory that I am from and am currently living. So it is Treaty 7 territory, which is the traditional territory of the Niitsitapi or Blackfoot Nation, which straddles our international divide between Montana and Alberta. Treaty 7 also includes the Tsuut'ina Dene Nation, the Yarhe or Stony Nakota Nation, who were also signatories to Treaty 7, and that was signed in 1877, by the way. And it is also home to Métis Region 3. So the place the Blackfoot called Mohkinstsis is now known as the city of Calgary. And it's the new name is bestowed by Scottish Canadian settlers based on a community in the Isle of Mull in Scotland. And it was based on the hometown of the head of the paramilitary Northwest Mounted Police Force that built a fort on that site. So it really is a stunning landscape of ancient hoodoos with exposed dinosaur bones, glacial lakes, and soaring mountains, rolling foothills, sweeping plains, scented with sage and sweetgrass, home to millions of bison. And Treaty 7 in 1877 was a pivotal moment in the European colonization of this part of the Americas. I would say the colonial imprint intensified in so many countless ways in the decades to follow, it's far too numerous to even hint at it in our limited time. But it bears mentioning one particular century-long experiment, and it's in the realm of education, or rather the perversion of education, is something called the residential school system. So what that was a government-funded and sanctioned church-run program that in its manifestation was really cultural genocide and in the name of enforced Christianization. It was quite literally designed, in the words of one of its chief architects, to, quote, destroy the Indian and the child. So the Truth and Reconciliation Commission was mandated to look into this nationwide program, and it produced a galvanizing report in June of 2015. And I would say that moment in 2015, along with a parallel social movement, grassroots social movement called Idle No More, were important forces in accelerating post-secondary institutions, really scrambling to address the calls to action that came out of that report, as well as the broader calls for reconciliation, for decolonization, and for what some people call indigenization, although that can be a problematic term for non-Indigenous people to try and adopt and claim any ownership of. So I'll focus just briefly on Mount Royal University. We're a liberal arts based undergraduate only campus of about 10,000 undergraduate students. Like virtually every post-secondary in the country, MRU has developed an Indigenous strategic plan. It is one of a number of campus-wide commitments that rolled out in the following years, following the Truth and Reconciliation report. I'm going to just say it here, I think ours was hastily rolled out, putting the need to signal that this is important ahead of the imperative of deep consultation. So other universities have taken longer, but I would say some of the more recent plans are more rich and informed by deeper forms of consultation. So some important things have happened from this, nonetheless, and contiguous with this plan. This is our campus, an aerial view of campus with the in the near west, or in the midground of this photo, is actually the reserve lands of the Tsuut'ina Dene Nation. And they have a casino and entertainment resort kind of close to the foreground. And then beyond that is of course the foothills and the Rocky Mountains. So some things have happened. There's efforts to symbolize the fact of our status, our collective status as treaty people. Whether we are Indigenous or non-Indigenous, we are all treaty people, and trying to socialize that fact through symbols. So here, for example, the flag protocols changed so that the Treaty 7 flag, which is on the left there next to the Canadian flag, and the Métis flag, which is the Mobius loop on the blue, those flags have the highest prominence. So when we have international dignitaries, for example, or during Pride Week or whatever, it's the other flags that come down. Those two remain permanent. That's a small but symbolic gesture. A number of campuses have also done similar kinds of things. There's been physical changes to campus, changes to the art and procurement and facilities. I'll give you one example. We have facilities managers on campus now trained, and maintenance people, to, when a unit on campus wants to set up the teepee or lodge, they contact our Indigenous Center, which is the Niskim Center, and they facilitate the cultural process and the education of teaching people on campus or groups of students to set up the teepee and take down the teepee and to steward it appropriately. But our maintenance and ground staff are also trained to help facilitate all that. And so that's again, a small example, but notable. There are a number of events now, keynote speakers. This is Sheila Wap-Cloutier, Inuit climate change activist who was on campus a few weeks ago. And she has a kind of scholar in residence position now at MRU. This is a very interesting one. This is actually Bret the Hitman Hart, if for any of those who are into pro wrestling, receiving an honorary degree last year from Elder McSickham. And the honorary degree process is now coupled with an Indigenous naming protocol. So again, it's not just about honoring through the Western lens of honorific titles, but also trying to ensure that it's a deeper process. Our own little staff team at the Institute for Community Prosperity on campus, we have a staff team that kind of balloons to about 10 or 12 people over the summer and then shrinks back to about 5 people during the rest of the year. We always engage in, we're engaged in a process ourselves called Reconciliation in Action. And that is really led by one of our extraordinary team members, Tash Caffro, pictured here with the current mayor of Calgary, Naheed Nenshi. And so again, you know, we've done a number of exercises and retreats that are really aimed at looking inward and thinking about our agency, our role, our and our business model, everything we do through a more inclusive lens. And I would say we're really at the start of the journey. Yeah, we're 2 years in, but we're really at the start of the journey. This is Blackfoot Crossing, where Treaty 7 was signed in 1877. We've had a retreat out there this past spring. It's strange to look at in this era of COVID-19 that we can actually get together in such a setting. But again, that process actually challenged us to come up with our own customized learning plan, or learning statement rather, which is our own kind of connecting our own identity, our ancestry, no matter where in the world we're from, to a broader objective for how we want to work with our colleagues and how we want to learn. So this is just one slide that just captures my particular personal statement, and the fact that I'm entirely of diasporic origins, a settler with roots in both Ireland and Germany, and statements around learning that's not just about knowledge accumulation, but also skills and working with your hands, and how do we be? How do we actually operate in the world beyond what we know? How do we interact with each other? How do we be authentic? And so on. Yeah, so that's us. I'm happy to get into some of the details of what other campuses are doing across Canada, or what we're doing as well. We're also doing some stuff with rural communities that are not specifically Indigenous, but I think I'll stop there and hear from Radovan.
Thank you, James, for all the things that you've shared. Right now I'm in Cholula, in the state of Puebla in Mexico. You might know Cholula because there's a hot sauce named after us, but it's not produced in Cholula. Cholula is the oldest city in Latin America that has been inhabited without interruption since 1,500 years. So here from where I live, I can see a pyramid. It was built by the Toltecs and the Aztecs many years ago, and on the top of it is a church built by the Spanish people that conquered here Puebla. And since this place has been inhabited without interruption throughout so many years, we have the fortune to coexist with many people that have lived in Cholula, where people have rooted traditions, and that they keep celebrating a lot of things that are a mix of the Indigenous culture and the Spanish culture. So I'm very happy and honored to be with you. And today I'm going to show you what we are doing in UPAEP, which is a private university here in Puebla, in the state of Puebla. We're a Catholic university. I don't know if you can see my screen. Can you confirm, Nicole?
We're seeing a message, Radovan, that you've started to share the screen. Oh, here we go. There it is.
Okay. Moving. Sorry, in Mexico, as probably many parts of the world, we're struggling with the internet. So I'm going to talk to you about what the reality we live in Mexico regarding education for rural and Indigenous students. And I'm going to talk to you about this program that we have, that it's called Una Apuesta de Futuro. It's it translates as a bet for the future. So Mexico, we have around 120 million people in the country. We have 23% of that population that lives in rural communities, and most Indigenous people live in rural communities. 10% of the total population in Mexico are considered Indigenous population. 60% of that population live in 6 states of the Republic. In Puebla, where we are located, in Oaxaca, in Chiapas, in Veracruz, in the state of Mexico, and in Yucatan. Some numbers. In Mexico, we have the average school years that people go into education are 9.1 throughout their lives. In Puebla, it's 8.5 years of education. And the average school years for indigenous population in Puebla is 6 years. This means that indigenous people would barely finish grade school from 1st to 6th grade, as we have in Mexico, the grade school. And that is very challenging. I mean, even the average school years for the whole population is a challenging situation, while for indigenous population is even more challenging. So in 2015, only around 18% of the population in Mexico between 25 and 64 years had finished a degree in higher education. For the indigenous population, this number was only 6.6%. This means that for every 100 indigenous students that go into grade school, only 7 are able to go to college or university. We have a comparison with other countries on the OECD. And as you see, the average of population that have a tertiary education, that have gone into higher education, is 45% in all the countries that you see on the bottom. In Canada, it's 61% of the population. But in Mexico, only 23% of the population. So we are in a very tough situation regarding higher education for the whole population, but even more for the rural or indigenous communities. One last chart I'm going to show you these hard numbers. You can see here that these are the income, how the income is divided from the lowest to the highest, and the distribution of a population between 18 and 23 years. This is like college age, you know, how population is divided in these income areas. And these bars show the percentage of students on these income levels that access higher education. So as you can see, in the highest income, it's a very high percentage of the population that it's enrolled in higher education. And in the lowest income, it's very low. And we know that indigenous population and rural population in Mexico are the population that it's in a poor condition, that it's have income below the line of poverty. So within this reality, the program of Una Apuesta de Futuro has been betting for the future of many rural and indigenous students since 2007. We believe in UPAEP that students from rural and indigenous communities must have this opportunity to access quality higher education, because we believe that there is a lot of talent and leadership in those communities that have not had an opportunity to develop those abilities and those skills to help others from their communities to have a more equal access to education. So this program has 3 basic pillars. One is the academic, another one is the community, and the other one is the social projects. And I'm going to talk very quick about the academic part of the program. We receive students from many different communities, and they enroll in a certain program, major program, and we have like a very close follow-up tutoring program throughout all their academic life in college, because many of them come from a very low level public education in their community. So they have to we have to help them level up to go through college life. And this tutoring program it's working very well because their GPA is above the university's GPA. The other pillar is community. They all live together in a building that 2 years ago, the university invested in a new building for them, because we believe it's so important that they live in community, because they share many values, they share many customs, and they need to be in a place where they feel safe, where they feel it's a home for them. And there's also a very close follow-up program for their community, their life community in this place. And also we have the social projects that it's where we, I think we have a difference from other kind of programs similar in Mexico, which we try to strengthen their change-making skills so they can become these change makers that will change the reality in their communities, that will change this inequality that I just showed you in the numbers throughout their college life. So here are some numbers of how this program has been from 2007 to last year. We have had 200 students. Unfortunately, we've had 67 that dropped out. It's important to mention that 43% of that number was in the first 2 years, because we were learning how to have this follow-up program and how to help the students go through this first cultural shock with the university. Today we have 53 students that are in the program, and we have almost 80 students that have finished their university. These students come from more than 100 communities from the states of Puebla, Guerrero, and Chiapas. And this is how they are kind of divided in the different majors. A lot of them are in the health and sciences, mainly studying for to be doctors or nurses or nutritionists or physicists. Also, we have many on the school business in different areas and social sciences. So we have a variety of students in all of the schools. And what I want to focus real quick is on how we provoke that they become these change makers. Part of the program, as I mentioned, is that they must have, one of the pillars is the social project. So throughout their college life, they must work and develop a social project of their own throughout all the 4 or 5 years that they take in the college. And we begin, and we have right now 12 projects that are active, that they're working in 17 communities, having an impact on almost 2,000 people. And they go from environmental issues to educational issues to health issues to productive issues with communities. And I just want to show you a little bit of the process we have with them. We start beginning to for them to identify what's a pain for them, what hurts in their lives that they want to change. And then we pair those pains with how the SDGs fit into those pains that they have in their communities or in the world. And then we start this apprenticing the problem process with them. You know, in the last session I was talking about how students sometimes resist to go through this research and trying to mapping the system and trying to figure out what the problem looks like in reality. But we try to work with them because even though probably a lot of them have lived these problems, they don't really identify the root causes and what the effects are on their lives. So we go through this process, and then we use tools such as design thinking to create and prototype their projects. And then we have, I'm showing you some images of the project logos where they work in different communities, the environmental issues, educational issues. They work with producers in different communities to improve their income because they have probably a reserve and they want to make this ecotourism place. So our students are helping them to develop that business plan and training them in different skills and stuff so they can be self-sustainable. So these are some examples of what we do with students in their projects. And here's some pictures of them. They mostly work in the summer. They go all the summer into a community and work for 2 or 3 months with the community, with kids in grade schools, with elder people, and try to figure out what the problems are in the community and making bridges between elder people and young people to try to solve them together. We also have these producers that have this ecotourism project in a community where they have fireflies, and they want to exploit that nature event for tourism to go and appreciate that event. And also we have students that are painting murals in the community to help them have health habits and stuff. And this one is Floriberto. He was going to be in Minnesota with us. Now he's in his community because of this social isolation. And he is a native Nahuatl speaker. So many of the students he works with don't speak Spanish. And obviously they have a drawback on their education. But since he's a native speaker, he can teach them Spanish using their native language as a tool to improve that. And now they are working on how to make this go into different communities. So just to wrap it up and leave it for Q&As and the discussion, we have a very strong follow-up program that we've been learning and developing throughout the years to make this program a very comprehensive program for all of the areas, the academic area, the community area, and the social project area. We are strengthening the students' change-making skills. So now they are working, a lot of them are working in nonprofits in their communities, or they're working in international nonprofits with perhaps women that are binational, or they're working in banks also, but they have social projects of their own, or they're doctors working in a lab, but they go every week into their community to help people in the community to have better health conditions. So it's a lot of things that we see, we haven't measured, and as we talked before in another session of this impact measurement, but we know where these alumni are and what they're doing to change their communities. And also this multicultural approach that we have, these students have become a fundamental part of the university life because they participate in many institutional events. All of the community and in the university knows them because they are the ones that always win certain challenges because of their richness in their culture. They participate in food challenges because they have a lot of background on that. They even are teaching their native languages to other students. And also another thing that we are focused very much in is this multidisciplinary work within them, because we also work different teams. These projects are with different teams from different disciplines. And that has made this project a very great experience. We have a lot of things to do and learn, and we would like this program to spread in other universities or countries. But we are still in the process of learning, even though we've been working with it for 12 years now. And well, that's it now. And I pass it on to Nicole.
Thank you very much, James and Radovan. Now we were scheduled to have Lindsay Redcrow as another speaker in this session, one of the students from James's institution, Mount Royal University. Unfortunately, she hasn't been able to join us. So we have that additional time for the Q&A. Just looking at how many of us there are in the group, I think we could try to have you unmute yourselves and speak. Otherwise, if you prefer, then please feel free to put your questions into the chat box. And maybe to get things kickstarted, maybe Radhavan, I would like to ask a little bit, if you could share with us a little bit more about the admissions process into your program.
Sure. We started, the first year we didn't know really how to make this happen. So we went to I used to work in a nonprofit in the northern Sierra of Puebla, where we had some influence in communities. So we used the Indigenous radio that it's in one of the communities that reaches a lot of places in the Sierra. So we used that as a first tool of call for students. As we went by in years, we started to ask the local organizations or local enterprises or local groups to be the ones that are proposing the students for the program. Because we believe that students that have been in a local community organization working with them have more skills and more possibilities to be a change maker after college and go back and change things in their community. So right now, what we have is 2 or 3 ways of students coming into the university. One is local organizations that are the ones that present their candidates. Another one is alumni that are working in their communities that they also can present candidates for this program. And also some schools that learn about this program, so they just come and present their candidates. We have a very thorough process of selection because this program costs around $305,000 a year. No, $350,000 a year. Because we give full scholarship, housing, and in some cases money for food, so they can survive, because they wouldn't have another way to be in a higher education institution. So they come, they have this exam at the university, and then we go through an interview process with some people at the university. We try to choose the best profiles that have experience in local work with the community. They have good grades. It's not the essential thing, but we need to know that students are good at something. And this interview, that it's very important for us to get to know the students.
Okay, thank you. I don't see any questions in the chat box, but would any of the participants like to ask a question?
I have a question. We're looking at developing an Indigenous pathway program at Laurier, and we've just applied for a grant to do that work that would sort of augment and try and create a bit of an ecosystem for Indigenous students at the institution. My question is for Radhavan. It sounds to me like you have this sort of blending of curricular and co-curricular. Is the program that you're offering sort of a supportive wraparound for students in a particular program, or are you delivering both curricular and co-curricular through the initiative that you're working with? And if you're not doing it, then what are the mechanisms for bringing together those two, that curricular and the co-curricular pieces?
Yeah, I mean, every student chooses their major, and that's a part of the program, that they are free to choose whatever major they want. And we try to blend that with this follow-up program where we mentor them through this process of making the projects, through this process of living in communities, through this process of participating in the student, in the institutional life. So as they go into their academic programs, we are working in a parallel way, this other part of the program for they to build the social projects. And many times the project has to do with their major, but many times it doesn't. Because probably they have a stronger challenge to solve in their communities that is not really related to the major they are studying. So it's very interesting because, I mean, as they are advancing in their college life, they start to include a lot of things that they're learning in their majors into their projects without probably even knowing. But also they look out for different teachers in different specialties in different areas to help them with certain specific issues in their projects so they can work in a better way with them. I don't know if that answered your question.
No, it does. Thank you very much. This is one of I think that the challenges is how do you bring together those two pieces, right? You know, often those sort of community engaged social projects fall outside of the curricular. And so one of the things that we're trying to do is think about how do we integrate those things so that they can be credited as well towards some of the curricular requirements. But I appreciate that. I may email you as we get further along in our process, and James as well. Thank you. This has been very helpful.
Thank you, Heather. I see we have a question for you, James, in the chat. Is there a co-design process between the institution and the Indigenous communities when creating programs to understand needs? And if so, what does this process look like? This question is from Joanne Renaud.
Yeah, good question. I think it's sometimes there are processes that look a little more like co-design, and other times less so. And I mean, one of the things that's going on, at least on our campus, and I imagine right across the country, is there's sort of the macro formal statements like strategic plan level governance that would involve the president, the provost, the whole of campus. And there are certain processes underway at that level that I'd be less able to speak to or to advocate on behalf of. And all the way down to the very fine grain level, where I notice that there's a real genuine, and what the point I was thinking of making earlier was that it's kind of a sandwich approach where that high level stuff is really important, but also the grassroots stuff is really important. And generally speaking, the grassroots stuff is not really even co-designed. It's basically generated by communities or by students themselves as new interesting ideas. And then the middle ground, the middle part of the sandwich is kind of like at the department level or the faculty level, or with us like the institute level, where yeah, that starts to look more like co-design. So our Faculty of Business, for example, has a 13 or 14 member advisory body of Indigenous faculty and knowledge holders. Some have formal appointments at other universities. Others have roles within their communities, but related to education. And they come together, I think 4 times a year, to advise the business and communications faculty in general about the priorities they should be making with respect to Indigenous inclusion, Indigenous content, and so on. So I think it's a whole spectrum from like top-down design that has relatively little genuine, authentic input, all the way to grassroots initiatives that are really endogenous and Indigenous led. And we're kind of in the middle of that. And one of the things we can do is help sponsor, as an institute, what we have a little pot of money, resources to help sponsor some and give an initial spark to some of those grassroots initiatives. So we, like, some of the things that have come out of that are an Indigenous Student Energy Summit, which in my view is the only thing that is a decent conversation between activists and Indigenous people, both who want to work in the traditional energy sector, the oil and gas sector, and also those who want a different future, a future that is based on renewables, that doesn't involve oil and gas, that doesn't involve pipelines. And this group of Indigenous students were able to host a 250-person conversation with CEOs and senior leaders from oil and gas companies, David Suzuki Foundation, Sierra Club, Enviros, Indigenous activists, and get them all in the same room. Nobody else has been able to do that I've been able to see. And so that's entirely Indigenous led. Another one, a couple relate to curricular opportunities. There's a Treaty 7 field school out of the Department of History, and that's co-designed with Treaty 7 nations. And then another one that's called the Environmental Reconciliation Field Course with our Department of Outdoor Leadership and phys ed. And that's co-designed with the Stoney Nakoda Nation and co-delivered with that nation. Yeah, so it's a real mixed bag. It's a spectrum. But yeah, I mean, co-design is the sweet spot if you can try and strive for that. I know some of our colleagues in the post-secondary world have done a really beautiful job of co-designing at a really high level, like University of Saskatchewan. It's well worth looking at their strategic plan. It is a work of art. It's amazing. It's beautiful. And that appeared to have had a much more rigorous, deep process of engagement. And they took the path of, let's not just have an Indigenous plan over here on the side. Let's actually inoculate or inculcate Indigenous values and participation in the design of our entire institutional plan. So yeah, University of Saskatchewan, worth looking at.
Thanks, James.
This has been a really exciting process for me to sit through. I got involved in a contract with the Cancer Legacy Prevention Fund, and they wanted to train Indigenous community leaders to become researchers, community researchers in their own community. And Radovan, when we started, there was a real, we thought we would have the time and the money to be able to bring people together to study together. And the decision was made above my pay grade to go with a distance education program. And what that did was sort of disconnect people from their communities because the students had to work in groups. So as I listened to you and to James, I started to think about perhaps there is a role for distance education where people from a community come to the formal training, but they engage people within their community because in the one community that was very strong, a lot of the people from the community actually took part in the classes. They go and not only were they doing research together, but they were learning how to do research together. And I'm just wondering what you think about as the potential for doing distance, because when you've got people coming from all four corners of the extreme four corners of a province, building that closeness and that interaction and support is really difficult.
You want to go ahead, James?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're onto something really interesting. I think one of the big issues, and I don't know whether 5G changes it or not, I don't know enough about the technology, is, our rural communities and our northern communities in Canada still don't have the kind of broadband access as the cities, generally speaking. And there's a real equity issue that's really, really coming to light in light of this pandemic, actually. But yeah, the medium is just a medium. And I think there's a lot that can be done. I mean, I think there's still a craving for face-to-face and still a particular power in that. But yeah, I actually think the potential of online learning with Indigenous communities is really, really significant, and with rural and northern communities.
But I was really thinking about how you build a community network that is affiliated with the training. Because I think when I saw the interest in the community, and especially when I was listening to the support that the group that lives together can provide for each other. I mean, the students themselves who are taking a distance education program, there is an isolation there. You know, yes, they work on projects together, but they're not from the same place. You know, so, and I'd love to be able to capture that, the electricity that you've captured, Radhavan, when we're looking at moving this concept forward.
Well, I mean, probably if in Canada you're facing problems with technology, in Mexico we are like a lot of steps behind that. And right now that our university is closed because of the pandemic, many of the students are struggling because most of them went back to the communities, are struggling so bad with taking the online classes that, I mean, it is a possibility, but we also believe that the value that they bring coming into the university to the rest of the community in the university,
yeah,
plus the network they make, plus they broaden their spectrum of what opportunities are out there and that they can take back to their communities. It's something that we strongly, well, I think we've seen how this has been very important for them. I mean, many of our students in this program have gone on exchange to Europe, to Latin America, and probably from a community of 300 people. And they never imagined that they could go abroad to know other cultures and other places. And I think that process of they coming with us has brought a lot of value to the community in the university to value the intercultural, multicultural world that we live in, and how important it is for our community to be integrated and be inclusive in that way.
An incredible program in Ottawa, award-winning program for new post-secondary students who are typically going to Algonquin College, in some cases University of Ottawa or Carleton, where they, it's called Nunavut Sivaniksivut, and it is a program where students from Nunavut will come, they will drop in, they will take courses and develop social networks with other Inuit students from the smaller communities in the north. The program was initially set up to just basically help orient you to living in the city, like how to take transit, you know, how to deal with landlords, all those kind of things. And it's grown to be a kind of crucible of solidarity and I guess Paulo Freire would call it, what is the term? Conscientization.
That's
they
right.
became conscious and mobilized around both the state of Indigenous affairs and Inuit affairs in Canada, but also like the deficits, like what could be changed and how could they become change makers. And you know, it's not an organization that I think uses the language of change making very much, if at all, but they've become in effect, this kind of, and it's through some of the things you're talking about, Nancy, that like developing a kind of cohort model and a mutual support network that has also had really interesting ramifications for their positions as leaders, not simply as learners.
Yeah. Thank you. That was wonderful.
So I think we have time for maybe one more question, if there is one out there. Any final comments, perhaps, from our speakers before we close?
Radovan, could you leave your email on the chat area?
Yeah, I already did.
Oh, okay.
Here it is. And we're happy to share and keep this conversation going. It's
yeah, I see it now.
It is a program that demands a lot of thinking and a lot of pivoting and learning on the way. But I mean, I think so far we've got good results that students are graduating, that they are being employed, that they are working on local organizations. They're going probably into other nonprofits, but they are putting their change-making skills into practice in the real world to help many others to make that change. So we're happy to share what we've learned in this.
Yeah, thank you.
Any final words, James?
Just a shout out to just another school who's doing really interesting work, Vancouver Island University, that have actually gone out into the communities and discovered, oh wow, there's a lot of people who are right next door to us, Indigenous and rural students who are not enrolling, and for whom, even though there's close geographic proximity, the idea of university is just cognitively a world away. And so they've helped get families signed up to something called the Canada Learning Bond, which is a government incentive program that if you save a little bit of money for post-secondary education in kind of like a registered savings plan, a tax-sheltered savings plan, the government will actually match to a certain degree and incentivize you sort of building that fund up. So even if you build up enough to take 2 or 3 courses, for your kids to take 2 or 3 courses, once they leave high school, it's a huge predictor for, like, you get a taster for post-secondary, it's demystified. That's a major factor in getting students to stick with it. So, you know, huge kudos to Vancouver Island University for making that a high priority, and like getting into families where kids are still in elementary and get them signed up to the Learning Bond. Because the whole question of like, and inclusion, I think is a big one that we have not done enough of in Canada, and I think we can do a lot more to just be more inclusive. Stop focusing just on the grades you have in grade 11, you know. And most people don't even know they like learning until they get to university. And how do we get people in the door and stop focusing on those measures that become exclusive barriers?
Well, thank you, James and Radovan. Thanks to all of you. We're coming to the end of our time. I hope that you've found this session useful. We've had some contacts here, some new ideas. And thanks again to Ashoka Yu for bringing us together to make these contacts, albeit virtually. So take care, everyone, in these times of pandemic.
Gracias. Thank you, Nicole, for facilitating.
You're very welcome. Take care, everyone.